My HOA president didn't just complain about my fence. She actually tried to move my property line to make the house next door look more valuable. The worst part, she chose the exact morning my proof was about to arrive. My name is Harold. I'm 67 years old, retired, and honestly, all I want these days is a quiet backyard, a hot cup of coffee, and the peaceful lake view that convinced me to buy this house in the first place. Everything stayed peaceful until Linda became HOA president. She didn't stroll through the neighborhood like everyone else. She patrolled it. That shiny clipboard never left her hand, and she always seemed to be searching for something to complain about. Leave your trash can out for a few extra hours? She noticed. Garden hose visible from the sidewalk? You'd get a warning. She even once told my neighbor his bird bath created visual confusion. To this day, none of us knows what she meant. The house next to mine had been sitting on the market for months. It was a nice property, but it had one big problem. The best lake view wasn't actually from that lot. The perfect view came from my side of the fence, across my yard, past my maple tree, and over a small slope that legally belonged to me. One Tuesday morning, I stepped outside with my coffee and saw Linda standing near my fence with a nicely dressed couple. The husband looked like he was already imagining the purchase, while his wife couldn't stop admiring the lake. Then I heard Linda say something that immediately caught my attention. "This side gives you the perfect lake view." The woman smiled and asked, "So, this section comes with the property?" Linda flashed one of her polished HOA smiles and answered, "The HOA considers this part of the community's lake view corridor." That sentence alone told me something wasn't right. I walked over calmly and asked, "Morning, Linda. Mind telling me what exactly a community lake view corridor is?" Her smile faded just enough to notice. "Harold, please don't interrupt. This is official HOA business." I looked down, and that's when I saw it. The wooden boundary stakes beside my fence had been moved several feet into my yard. The soil around them was still fresh, like someone had relocated them not long ago. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse anyone. I simply smiled, turned around, and went back inside. A little later, behind my shed, I found one of the original property markers, half buried under a pile of mulch. That's when I stopped believing this was a simple mistake. Linda knew exactly what she was doing, and luckily for me, I still had every document she was hoping I'd forgotten. I figured Linda would at least wait until the buyers were gone before pushing things further. She didn't. About 10 minutes later, an email from her landed in my inbox with the subject, "Notice of Obstruction." According to Linda, I had interfered with an HOA-approved property presentation. She even claimed my fence, my shed, and my maple tree were creating confusion for potential buyers. Then came the threat. If I kept challenging the so-called Lakeview corridor, the HOA could fine me $250 a day. I leaned back in my chair and laughed so hard that my old beagle, Rufus, looked up at me like I'd finally lost it. Years ago, I probably would have fired back immediately. Not anymore. One thing retirement has taught me is never interrupt someone while they're busy creating evidence against themselves. So instead of replying, I printed the email and pulled out the folder from my home purchase. Inside were my original survey, the official property map, and photos taken when I first bought the house. One picture clearly showed the original boundary marker sitting exactly where it belonged, right beside the corner of my fence. That alone was helpful. But by evening, things got even more interesting. My neighbor George walked over carrying a folded sheet of paper. George lives across the street and notices everything. If something unusual happens in the neighborhood, chances are he's already seen it. "Harold," he said, handing me the paper, "I think you'll want this." It was a screenshot from his doorbell camera. The image showed Linda standing near my fence 2 mornings earlier with a man wearing work gloves. The picture wasn't crystal clear, but it didn't need to be. Both of them were bent over near the property line, and one of them was holding what looked exactly like a wooden boundary stake. George shook his head and said, "I didn't think much of it until I saw her showing those buyers around." That was the moment everything changed. Now, I didn't just have paperwork proving where my property ended. I had a timeline and evidence that someone had deliberately moved the markers. The next morning, I called the same licensed survey company that had marked my property when I bought the house. The woman pulled up my file and said, "Yes, Mr. Harold, we still have your original survey on record." Then she paused, the kind of pause that tells you something isn't normal. "Funny timing," she said. "Someone from your HOA called us last week asking if property markers could be visually reinterpreted for a home sale." I just stared at the wall. Linda hadn't made a last-minute decision. She'd been planning this. The survey company scheduled an official survey for Friday at 9 a.m. Later that day, George stopped by again with another interesting piece of information. "Linda invited the buyers back Friday morning for their final walkthrough," he said. "Same day, same time." Friday morning, I made my coffee a little earlier than usual. Rufus waited by the back door while I sat on my porch like it was any other morning. I didn't call Linda. I didn't warn the buyers. I simply waited. At exactly 8:55, Linda pulled into the driveway wearing sunglasses and carrying a folder, looking completely confident. A few moments later, the buyers arrived behind her. The husband looked excited, and his wife already had a measuring tape in her hand, probably imagining where the patio furniture would go. Linda pointed toward my yard again. "Once this side is opened up," she said, "the lake becomes the property's best feature." Right then, a survey truck slowly turned onto the street. It rolled up quietly, and two surveyors stepped out carrying tripods, flags, and official records. The second Linda saw them, the smile disappeared from her face. She marched over to me and asked, "Harold, what is all this?" I took another sip of coffee and smiled. "Just making sure everyone sees where the real property line is." Even George, standing near his mailbox with a coffee mug, looked like he was trying not to laugh. The survey crew got straight to work. They checked the original records, measured from the legal boundary pins, and carefully marked the property line with fresh flags. Just as I'd expected, every flag landed exactly where my original survey said it would. The Lakeview slope, my maple tree, and the entire scenic view were all on my property. The wife looked at the new markers, then turned to Linda. "Wait, this isn't part of the lot?" The lead surveyor calmly shook his head. "No, ma'am, this land belongs to Mr. Harold." The husband opened the sales folder Linda had handed him earlier. "But this map shows the view extending through here." The surveyor glanced at it and replied, "That's a marketing sketch, not a legal survey." Trying to save herself, Linda quickly said, "It's just the HOA's interpretation." The surveyor looked at her for a second before answering, "Property lines aren't open to interpretation." That was all the buyers needed to hear. The husband closed the folder, handed it back to Linda, and said, "We're no longer interested." Just like that, her premium Lakeview sale disappeared. By Monday, the HOA board had everything: Linda's email threatening me with fines, my original survey, George's doorbell screenshot, and the survey company's official report. Linda wasn't dragged into court, but she still faced the consequences. She paid to have the boundary markers restored correctly, sent a written correction to both the buyers and the HOA board, and stepped down from the property committee. Even the listing changed. The premium Lakeview property was suddenly advertised as a charming home near community water access. Amazing how quickly the price drops when the truth replaces the sales pitch. As for me, I still spend every morning in the same chair with a cup of coffee, enjoying the lake view that was always mine. And every time Linda walks past my fence now, she doesn't mention Lakeview corridors or community interpretations anymore. She just keeps walking. So tell me, was I wrong for letting the survey crew reveal the truth in front of the buyers? Or did Linda finally learn that even karma respects property lines? If you enjoyed this story, I'd really appreciate your support by subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.